So, a good while ago on this video here, I made a quick tutorial, well I say quick, but it took me months to make, on how to make castles. And in that tutorial there was a little section that I talked about Japanese castles, but I wasn't really super happy about it. So, I built a Japanese castle here and I figured I can do a little bit of commentary on it and tell you all exactly the methods that I used, and maybe you can get something out of it. Listen to me, look at me, okay, look me in the eyes. Do not copy what I'm doing here block for block. I know that's not what some of you want to hear, but that's not the kind of tutorial that this is, okay? Listen to me. I'm not trying to be Father Denka Wizard here. I'm not trying to lecture you on your lifestyle or anything like that, but if you want to get good at building, try and just use this for inspiration, please. And also remember that this isn't exactly the one way that you can make these kinds of castles. There's all kinds of different block palettes that you can use, all sorts of different ways to structure them. There's walls, different foundations that you can use. So really try and make things your own. If there's something that you don't like about it, try making it yourself and try changing that thing. Now, we're going to start off real simple just with the foundation. I like to lay out a large square where I want the main structure to go, and then a secondary little square on the side where a nice supporting structure is going to go. I never thought that castles look super good sitting there on their own, so I always like to have a couple of buildings sort of around them. That's the point of the secondary building. But you can see we're kind of doing what I like to call the wedding cake. And Japanese structures especially love to do this sort of thing with the layering. So I'm starting off, I'm going to make this a 4-story building, and I'm adding this little ring around it. You can see here this top block, supporting block, and bottom block that I use here. This is essentially going to make up the top part of each story, and then we'll add the walls in detail. And that's why it's really important to do these kinds of castles with one block centers. Next thing that I like to do is add some slabs around the edge right here, and then put a block around the outside. I played around with a couple different designs, but eventually ended on this one here. Now if we pause and look at this, you can see I've got 2 slabs on the outside, a full block, and then a stair block with our nice little supporting alternating logs underneath it. I then put some little peaks in the corners, and this is also going to take some experimentation, so just do something that looks kind of natural so that they're not too steep or too sharp, and then add some alternating blocks going around the bottom. And I played around with a couple different blocks, but eventually just decided to keep it as dark oak. Now after building the roof, you notice that there's not a whole lot of space here for a wall to go before we start getting into roof territory. So I decided to lift this up by 1 just so that I've got a nice 2-block space here to work with the roofs, and then build the roofing ring around it, so to speak. So I did that with all of the layers, and then essentially just copied that roof design that I did with all the rest of them. Now I switched to shaders, not because I forgot to put the shaders on in the first one, but because I totally did that on purpose to make it easier to see the intricacies of the roof. This top roof is essentially going to be the same thing. The only difference is instead of having it come up to a point, it's going to come up to a gable, and you're going to kind of see what I mean by that in a second. So I'm starting off more or less the same, but I'm adding this shape in the center, so I know how to gradually steepen it. I do the outside ring, same as the other layers, add the peaks, and then I just extend this piece out until it reaches the edge of the outside roof. I just add some sandstone in the middle with some wood beams, and that's a nice easy way to just sort of cover up any walls that need covering up in this. But we're not quite done with the roofs yet, because we've still got a couple more to make. I make this gable here on the bottom roof right here, and just again add some sandstone and some wooden logs to give it some detail. Windows are also a nice way to do it, but just sort of form the roof around it so it looks nice and set in. And then whatever you do to one side, make sure that you do on the other side with these kinds of castles. A good tip that I like to use is just extending the blocks out from the other side of the roof and building it right there. Over on the 2 opposite roofs, I wanted to do something similar, so I decided to split it into quarters and make those 2 other centers the center for 2 other gables, if that makes sense. And just add some windows in there. I eventually decided on this design here, where you can see just some patterns with stairs and slabs. But if you decide to make this yourself, always feel free to fill it in however you like. I fill in the extra walls just with a couple of extra logs and windows, and then we can go ahead and move on to the next story. Now for this story here, I'm essentially doing the same thing I did on the first roof, but it's important to change things up a little bit. So I'm putting just a single gable here because I don't have quite as much room, and adding a nice large window to it. On the other side, I wanted to add this kind of curve that you see in a lot of Japanese castles. So I'm doing that with slabs, mostly just trying it out, seeing what works, and then editing it as I want. And then I also added this another big window in it. Now for this top story here, because we don't have a whole lot of room, I wanted to extend the wall out a little bit and add some windows. You can also see me adding in some of these spruce trapdoors to just give the walls a little bit more depth and a little bit more texture, which works super well if you're ever doing heavy wood builds like this. Before we go on to the bottom story, and I know it's kind of weird that we're doing that story last, but I wanted to extend the foundation out so I know kind of what to build the front door around. And I'm doing the same thing I did on the top story and extending the building out, just give it a little bit more texture. Putting some walls on the side, so more of those trap doors, and I'm also extending the foundation out just so it's not quite so flat, and then going in to fill it in. Now that's essentially the main building done. I'm just adding in some little details like some lanterns and a couple of textures here and there, and we can go ahead and move on to the supporting structure. Now the supporting structure is more or less the same, so I'm not going to go into too much detail for it, but the point of something like this is to complement the first building. So one important detail that I want to mention here is that you have the gable facing in the other direction, as you can see that I put it in there, just so that it complements the other building, the main building, and makes it seem a little more different. I then connect the two with the same kind of pattern that I use to connect all the other buildings, and then add in the nice slope for the roof. I use lots of these trapdoors here just to make it have a more wooden and not quite so permanent feel to it. And then here I'm panning up so you can see exactly how I connected the roofs together. Now I had a lot of requests from people watching the live stream to do the interior, so here's my cheat for doing large builds that don't seem like they can fit an interior very well, and that's just to pretty much do the first story. I know it seems like cheating, and it kind of is, but most of the time you can just show off the first story and other people will just think, wow, he's done the interior. They won't even ask about the other parts. So that's exactly what I'm doing here. I'm just putting in a nice simple wooden floor, filling up the walls to make them seem a little more even with some extra logs, and then adding some texture on the roof by using slabs instead of full blocks, and some lanterns. And it's a nice way to change up the block palette on the inside. Doing essentially the same thing for the other structure, just adding in those carpets, the roofs with the slabs, the lanterns, and finishing off the interior walls a little bit. Another thing that I want to point out is that you can use stair steps in the corners just to give it a little bit more support, and that's always a nice good detail to add. And then after we're done with all that, you can see that we're pretty much done with the entire castle. Any other holes that you have left, you can fill up with some logs and some sandstone pretty easily. It's really just a matter of nailing those roofs, and then once you get that, everything else is, for the most part, just some patterns of different sandstones and woods. But here we have some shots of the exterior. You can see me going around. I've filled in the foundation. I've used lanterns a lot because I think that makes a really good detail. And then if you want to go take it a step further, you can do some extra landscaping around just to set it into the land and add some texture to your foundation. Also feel free to decorate the interior however you like, if you want to add furniture, extra walls, rooms, anything like that, and that'll add just an extra layer of complexity to your building. So we did it, a Japanese castle. That was a lot of work, but I know what you're thinking. You're saying, but DankoWizard, I like this tutorial, but I really wanted to see you build it in person with a face cam in a live stream format where you interact with the audience. To which I say, fear no more, viewer, because that's exactly what I've done, and I've linked those live streams down below so you can go and check them out if you want to see exactly what my thought process was live for building this castle here. So make sure to check that out. I've also got an Instagram now. I have an Instagram. You can go follow me. It's just @DankoWizard on the Instagram. You can come say what's up to me. You can come like my posts or DM me, and I'll say what's up back to you. Thank you guys all for watching. I really appreciate it. My name is DankoWizard, and peace out.